Thank you for listening to the Drinks.com podcast. I'm Brandon Amoroso, your host, and today I'm talking with Joe Fisch, CEO at Wine Access, a source for expertly curated wine. Thank you for coming on the show, Joe.
No, Brandon, thanks for having me, and happy to be here.
So before we dive into some of the topics we want to cover today, can you give everybody just a quick background and intro on yourself and how you got to this point?
Yeah, I would love to. So been at Wine Access now for about 6 years or so. So I originally came in as the VP of Finance back in 2017, and then 18 ended up moving in a current role as CEO. But prior to that, I'd had a number of different roles, mostly in the retail and consumer space. So prior to that, I was at the Ghirardelli Chocolate Company, which was awesome experience. Was there for about 2.5 years, and I've always said that if I can't eat or drink the product that we're selling, then I won't be able to understand it. So if I had to do cybersecurity SaaS business, I'd be in so much trouble. But before that, I was at PwC for about 7 years. I worked both in our deals practice, so mostly doing buy side and sell side due diligence for private equity, again in the retail consumer space, and then was in audit for about 3 years. And that's actually where I really got my first love of wine. So my two biggest clients at the time were Kendall Jackson and Foster's Wine Estates, or what is now Treasury. In my head, I still always call them Foster's. And this was back in around 2007, 2008, and fresh out of school. It was great because I got to go work on these two clients that are making absolutely amazing wine, spending my summers up in wine country, which was a lot different than the year before when I was drinking Mickey's 40s in a college dorm. I remember at Treasury, getting to go into the employee store and was able to pick up Barringer Private Reserve 03 for really great prices. And I popped open that first bottle when I got home with some of my roommates, and were like, holy cow, this is amazing. I was like, this is also terrible because I think I'm going to develop a really expensive habit. So ever since that time, I was like, how do I get back in, I should say, how I would really like to be in wine. So that's always been one of these things in the back of my head of okay, eventually I'm going to move into wine. So spent some time in audit, and then moved into our deals practice. So doing a lot of consulting. So you're flying all over the US, and you're not paid well, but at least you're kind of eating and drinking pretty well. So that again really developed the love for food and wine, which was such a big, at least from a food standpoint, was very big in my family. So continue on throughout my career. The Ghirardelli comes up, and then finally the opportunity for Wine Access. Wine Access comes up, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be perfect because, well, I thought that potentially working at a winery could be interesting. I wanted to be able to do something that was a little bit more broad-based, working across multiple brands, and also being able to kind of use some of my background that I had in e-commerce and retail and consumer. So when the job for Wine Access came up, I remember my predecessor was looking for someone who knew e-commerce, so that's got a super wide funnel. And it's they also had to run a finance group. Same thing. The funnel doesn't get that much more narrow. And they're they also have to have experience in wine and finance in wine. So there's probably 5 of us. So my buddy ended up getting an interview. He's like, I'm going to pass, but you should talk to Joe. And then that's how I ended up at Wine Access, and have been here since. So.
That's awesome. And for those listening, what exactly is Wine Access?
Yeah, so we are a direct-to-consumer e-commerce platform. So 99% of what we do is direct-to-consumer, finding what we think are the best wines in the world, pound for pound. So I have a great team, master somm on the team, foremost sake expert, advanced somm, who have dedicated their lives to going out and finding the best bottles in the world, in which we always put together with a 500 to 1,000 word narrative when we put that wine in front of customers. So we really want customers to get the best wine, but just as importantly, know who are the people, what's the place behind it, why is this relevant? Why is this relevant to you? And that's what we really showcase to do. Always ensuring kind of perfect provenance. So the way that we tasted it in the chateau is the same way it tastes when it gets to your doorstep, and then all backed by phenomenal customer customer service. So really kind of your platform, your access to the world of absolutely amazing wines.
Yeah, something that, in wine or anything else, if you don't have the product quality at a minimum, then, nothing else can happen. It doesn't matter, what you do from a retention marketing standpoint if the customers hate the product the first time that they try it. And so sometimes I think brands and companies have to face the hard truth that maybe they need to rethink the product a little bit, or, tinker with it, because that might actually be where the issue lies.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's probably nothing worse than like getting a bottle of wine, you pour it for a bunch of friends, you take a sip, and then everyone's like immediately dumping it out. Like there's nothing sadder than that. And then having to take that bottle and walk over to the sink and like pour it out, or save it to cook a little bit later. But that can sometimes be an expensive bottle. So I think you're exactly right. Like you got to nail the product down.
The moment where you are able to turn a non-wine drinker, or I have a lot of friends who they only drink white wine, and I'm more of a red person. But when I can get either like a person from either of those two groups and then introduce them to one of my favorite bottles of red wine, and then they're like, "Oh wow, this is amazing! Like this is really good." I'm like, "Yeah, that's because you've been drinking shit for the last 30 years, and so this is what you should be having." And that's a fun experience to get to educate. And it's not like I know a ton either, and I love to be on the other end of the side, other side of the equation, where somebody's introducing me to something that I haven't tried before. But I like to try everything. I think it narrows your palate if you're like, oh, I only drink this specific varietal.
So will you pour it for that? Will you get like the dark black glasses where you like can't see through, and you either pour red or pour a white in there, where they're just like, okay, you just have to taste it objectively, so they don't know what they're tasting? Or do they just say, come on, trust me guys, like you're gonna like this? How do you go about doing that?
I have not done that, but that is an interesting concept. I might actually have to try that. Typically I am doing it over dinner, and I actually think it's even funnier when they know it's red wine, and people don't like to be wrong, and then they try it, and you see the gears sort of turning in their head, and it's like, oh wow, like yeah, this is actually pretty great. And I'm sure maybe one or two people are just saying that, but for the vast majority of them, you can see whether or not they liked it based off of does the bottle last or does the bottle get finished, and
right.
That's the biggest telltale sign for me.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the alcohol business, though, like why wine versus necessarily liquor or beer? Like what brought you into wine versus some of the other alcohol categories?
So I think that there's really no other product on earth. Like I really truly believe there's no other product on earth that captures a time and a place better than wine. Like you go across food, like sure you have some stuff that might be like 21-day dry aged steak, but you're not having like 20-year dry aged steak, right? It's you are capturing a place and a moment in a bottle, and I just think that is so cool. And there's just like no product like that. Sure, you have some like aged whiskeys, but yeah, it's like whether you're going like birth year, like your birth year, daughter's birth year, or it takes you back to a time of even when I think about like 2007, like when I graduated college, like there are these things that can spark memories and conversations, and there's just no product out there that can do that, and is why like I continue to love wine, and why I think it's why it's the best product on the earth.
I think wine, more than any other alcohol, is all about the setting, the people that you're with, the shared experience, and that's why I enjoy having wine over dinner, or having wine at an event, or having wine with certain people. Like if I don't like somebody, I'm not going to share a great bottle with them to begin with, but the experience makes it what it is, and all the unique history and background as well.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Because actually, that you say that, and it prompts it. So I do have there are certain wines that I won't even share with my best friends because I know they're not huge wine fans. But then I might meet someone who's like this amazing wine fan, and I might have met them for like 10 or 20 minutes, and I'm like, okay, come over here. Like you're drinking this, and then like one of my buddies will be like, you've known me for 20 years, and like you've never shared that with me. I was like, that's because you don't care. Like, so I think there's
Right.
also this connection of souls that come together when you have that wine, like when you have that person who really loves great food or great wine, that you have this instant connection with, that you can become, you know, that end up trumping your best friend of 20 years, because they're your wine friend, and they're in this special category.
Yeah, I got three buckets. I've got, anybody can have this. It doesn't matter. I mean, wine is basically free when you're in the industry and have access to anything that you could find at a Trader Joe's. Then you have, the mid tier, where I would say, people like that who you meet who are really passionate about it. Like, yeah, would love to share it with you. It doesn't really matter if you've known them for 5 minutes or forever. And then there's the third tier, which is, nobody's touching this. I'm not even touching it. And, maybe one day we'll break into it, but for the most part, we're just going to look at it and admire from afar and see what happens over the next 20 years.
No, exactly.
So having been having taken like a non-traditional path into the wine industry, what were some of the things that surprised you, coming from other industries, other verticals?
Yeah, I think there's the level of relationships and how important relationships are. Like, I've always come through my career, like, relationships are everything. It's like how you build your networks. It's how you find your mentors. It's how you find your mentees. I think that was one of the things that, there's a tremendous, like, in order for a brand to trust you, like a premium brand to be represented, when we're putting it forth on Wine Access, that relationship with the vintner is like so important, which is why we always want to tell great stories that really showcase those brands. And I knew that was the case coming in, but it's, being in the industry is even more so, because, a lot of these producers might only have, 500, 1,000, 2,000 cases, and like they get to kind of choose who they decide to work with. And that's why it's so important to invest in those relationships, and why I think having the amazing wine team we do is so critically important to what we do, because of honoring those relationships, whether it's with vintners, obviously with customers as well. So building that trust. So it probably sounds a little generic, but it like really, like, even that being said, like, it still really is such an important component of the wine industry. So I think that's one aspect of it. Then another, and obviously Drinks probably knows this really well, is like the digital adoption has been very slow in the industry, and Wine Access has built a business because of that. I still think that, like, I'm still surprised how much farther we have to go, which, I imagine is, good for anyone who's making a bet on wine and digital. But yeah, it's amazing to see some of these other, how far along these other industries are. So we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, that's something that that's something that's always shocked me, is why the wine industry in particular is forced to use tools that, other verticals that I've worked within are able to leverage. And you see it a lot on the software and technology side, whether it's your commerce platform or your email marketing platform. And, some of it makes a little bit of sense, because typically businesses will build stuff for the non-regulated industries first, and then they'll allow the regulated industries in. But then, it's not, I wouldn't say it makes sense in the fact that, the wine industry might be 10 plus years behind when it comes to some of the experiences that I've seen online. I feel like some of them even predate my existence when it comes to the online ordering process that I'll go through. But there's still some other legacy industries like that I'll run into every once in a while, whether it's because of regulation or for some other reason. And I think one of the easiest ways to tell is, like, how quickly can I get from, add to cart to this payment actually processing? And the other day I was ordering a pickup order from Pura Vida, which is this local spot down here in Miami. And it actually would have been easier for me to just like walk into the store and tap my card on the POS reader, because there was no accelerated checkout in any way whatsoever. I mean, forced to create an account, couldn't create it as a part of the checkout process, had to go through a separate experience, then had to verify my email. I mean, I think I sat in the car for 8 minutes before I was finally done placing this order. And that stuff is painful, especially in an industry where, I think the cool factor is something that's really important for the brands that are succeeding online right now. They're on the social channels like a TikTok. They have that customer experience that, the younger generation expects. And I think is leading a little bit into why, most people my age, they don't drink wine. They drink seltzer. They drink, alternative products, whatever it may be. And, in 30 years, people in that cohort are going to be the ones that are supposed to be buying, wine, the higher end wine as well. So it'll be an interesting, next 5 years, I think, as I hear time and time again from wineries, like that's a big concern for them. But it's like, okay, so now what are you going to do to address it?
Yeah. Well, good for you, one, for not abandoning cart. Like, I'm shocked that it went that long. Most people would have been like, you know what, forget it.
I'm stubborn as hell, so I wasn't leaving before that.
You must
was
have really
processed.
wanted whatever you're getting. You're just like, I have to have that.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, when you're talking about kind of younger generations as well, I mean, it's one of the things that, 5 years ago, I would have said, we have time to look at NA, like in terms of non-alcoholic drinks. And it's something that we're actually I've been spending a lot of time, like starting to form a thesis around it. Okay, like how do I understand who are the right brands? We partner with the Michelin Guide. So we're talking with a lot of chefs and a lot of restaurants and a lot of somms. And it's been a conversation that we've been having where, they said 5 years ago, no one had an NA program. And it's like now, you will see anywhere between 15 to 50% of covers in any given night are doing the NA pairing, which to me is just like, I was like shocked. So it's like each year I'm like, oh, it's only, we have to figure this out in 5 years. We have to figure this out in 2 years. Now it's like, okay, this is something where we need to like really form a good thesis around. So I feel like the last 3 months I've been taking calls with tons of different producers, trying to wrap my head around the NA side, because you look at the number of people abstaining from alcohol, well, it hasn't, I can't remember what the numbers are. It's something like 31% of the US, but it's up from 29%, which is not like a huge number till you look at like how big the US is, which means that some people have to really be pushing that number up. So when we're talking with these different brands, we're also seeing that people who are participating in these non-alcoholic wines, 80% of them actually drink alcohol. They actually drink. It's just that they're looking for different substitutes, maybe on that like Tuesday. So for me, it's making sure that we capture that part of the category, but also go through the same rigorous standards that we would for any particular wine.
Yeah, the no alc is interesting. For me personally, if I'm going to drink wine, I'm going to drink wine. And I'd rather, I don't know, I'd have like a poppy or an Olipop or something if I'm not drinking wine. So it's something that is rising a lot. And even like the rise of, CBD drinks or cannabis drinks is something that I've seen multiple people, less in Florida, a lot more in California, where, they show up to a party with like a 4-pack of one of those, seltzers that has cannabis in it versus showing up with a High Noon or a Happy Dad or whatever. And so you have some of the competition coming from there as well. But aside from no alc, like what are some of the other trends or things that you're seeing that you're interested in or looking to capitalize on?
Grower champagne for us has just been like a huge category. We've been doing a lot more direct import with different producers. I think there's probably like 3 or 4 that we work with quite a bit, and I mean it's amazing because you're getting these absolutely like stunning grapes that would otherwise be going into some of the like bigger champagne houses, and
Yeah.
you're able, for 40, 50, $60, you're getting these amazing champagnes. So that's really taken off for us over the last few years. When we can get Loire whites, those have done really well. There's obviously been a couple of rough vintages that have knocked down yields. So we've seen that move up, quite a bit. Trying to think what else, like, Greek white wines have helped. Cab obviously has been down. Napa Cab's been down because, like, when you lose a vintage or largely lose a vintage, you're just going to see a lot of supply, come off the market. But high-end Bordeaux, like the Grand Cru Classés, the first growth, second growths, et cetera, those have just been, like, for us, have just been on fire. It's like almost like we can't keep it in stock. As soon as we get it in, it's almost going right out the door. So definitely, like, a lot of French wines, and then some of the Sicilian wines, while it's kind of a smaller category for us, probably on a percentage growth, has come up quite a bit. So.
What's your average, like, bottle price point, would you say? And is your customer somebody who is looking to get into wine? Is it somebody who is like a wine aficionado?
Yeah, it's about 30. Our price point's probably around $32. I mean, it's average, right? So you have some bottles that are in the 20 range, and then if you're buying, Chateau Latour, I mean, you're $1,500. So on the number, but it's a much smaller number of people who are actually doing that. Well, I'd say that
Yeah.
most people would see themselves as, like, wine enthusiasts, to wine aficionados. So I think most people are in there where they kind of know enough to be dangerous, and they probably know the category that they really like. So they may come in and be like, I love Napa Cabs, I'm really well versed in this, but they may not be necessarily well versed in other parts of the world. So I think that's where we have, like, a pretty savvy. We have a pretty savvy buyer, but within potentially, like, a single category or a couple of them. And then every now and then we get some people who are new to wine who will, mostly come into one of our wine clubs. So wine club is about 15% of our, 15% of our business. And that would be something like a discovery club where they're saying, I'm new to wine. We love the content that y'all do. I learned so much from it, and I just, over every quarter I want 6 bottles, and I want to kind of learn about it. But the majority, I think, are pretty decently well versed. If they saw a label of a bottle shot of Silver Oak, even if you, like, pulled the name off of it, they'd probably be able to kind of identify what that is.
Got it. And how do you work with customers on, graduating them to new price points or to higher price points? Because
Yeah.
something I've seen anecdotally is people usually shop within a defined window, and that's their like price. They have their lower bound and then they have their upper bound, and it's like very psychological. Or, like, I know for me, I'm not touching anything at the grocery store that's under a certain price point. But I'm also the one who sits at the restaurant or, like, gets the list beforehand to see how badly I'm getting screwed over by the markup. But then there's other people who, they only drink cheap stuff and that's it, or they only drink high end stuff. Like, there's friends of mine that drive me crazy where it's like if it's not expensive, it's not good, whether it's wine or other things. I'm like, you're out of your mind. Like, there's plenty of stuff that's far better, small production, and it might be, a quarter of the cost. But how do you work on graduating customers to, like, higher levels of wine?
Yeah, I think the best way I can describe it is we meet customers where they're at first. So it's just like, okay, where's the level where we think it's going to be the highest efficacy of getting them to purchase, and then but more importantly, like, consume and like. And I think as you do that and you build trust, I think you will see customers tend to graduate either to different categories or maybe working their way up in a particular category. But it may not be like, hey, I've had 3 Napa Cabs from you, all in the $75 price point, and I love them, and now tomorrow I'm going to go buy, something for $300. So what we'll do is we may see them start to experiment a little bit more, because now the risk of them going from 75 to 100 is lower because they're like, look, you've knocked it out of the park. on the 3 or 4 things that I've tried, now I'm a little bit more willing to maybe move my way up. And from a content perspective, they can potentially see similarities in that higher price point bottle, but they're intrigued by something that it may do. It could be, hey, I've wanted to go. I've heard great things about Oakville or about this particular vineyard. Okay, maybe I will try it then. So whether it's consciously moving people, I don't know if we're consciously trying to move people up the ladder per se, but I do think that you tend to see people do that. Uh, and also, as well as I think as people build up cellars and have more and more wine, sometimes in their mind, at least I do, is I have kind of a fixed budget of what I'm going to spend on wine. And depending on how much I've depleted versus not, I'll still kind of spend to that level, but that may just mean I'm buying more expensive bottles, or at least that's how I'm like, well, I got to use my budget this year for it. So I think, yeah, I don't know if we consciously move people up, more so just try to provide them with wines that we think that they'll love, which may be more expensive, but they also could move into different categories or different types of cabs that could be less expensive.
Got it. So it's more about, what is the customer going to like than necessarily, hey, this is going to be a more expensive product or this is going to be, a lower price product.
Exactly, because I think at the end of the day, if we send them a bottle that they feel that, I don't want to say overpaid for, but they got something where they felt like they had to go and buy that. That's not a great experience. A great experience is almost like, well, great, you like Napa Cab. We actually think based off of your taste profiles, you might even like, something from Australia better, which actually could be less expensive, but it might be more like within their alley. And to me, that's a much more, I'm gonna get so many more people who are gonna like be smiling about that. And I think that's actually a really cool part of wine, going back to like capturing place and time better than anything else. I think it helps people connect to a different part of the world or something else they had never tried before.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. When it comes to what you're able to do, online versus in person, I guess, what are some of the things that you like to take advantage of in the e-commerce experience that you're just not able to do if you're selling the product like through retail or if you're selling the product in a tasting room? What are some of the e-commerce tactics that you can leverage?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this notion of personalization, like true personalization, that you can get in an e-commerce experience. Uh, you can get which sounds crazy because it's like if you go in person, you can kind of say what you like. Uh, but then there's something about where if you have a purchase history with a particular consumer over a 10-year period, and you actually know, we've profiled every single wine, and it has, based off of the things that you've rated and the things that you said, we actually empirically know that you like, bold reds, but you do like a little bit of acid. You do like a little bit of, you may like high tannin, and that might be hard to replicate in person unless you have direct access to someone's like buying profile. It's kind of the notion of like, if you have enough information or enough data, you have a better idea of potentially of what that person likes, even more than they do. So I think that's something that online, as long as you have that data backbone behind you, that's something that you can that you can showcase. And I think with every single wine that we write up and then we profile, you may not be able to get that like in a tasting room per se. You will have some extremely knowledgeable people being able to talk through probably 5 or 10 wines really, really, really intelligently. I think online, it's just simply we have just so much data around every wine and history that you're just able to demonstrate that in a pretty compelling way.
Yeah. What are you like? What are your thoughts though around how to navigate around the complexity of the regulatory environment in the U.S. when it comes to direct shipping of alcohol? Because that was totally new for me when I entered into this industry. It's like, what do you mean I can't just like start shipping stuff everywhere? And then there's also the rules and regulations when it comes to like the advertising of alcohol online. But how have you managed that component? like dealing with the regulatory framework that's in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Valley for the most part uses kind of the same. I feel like it's the same number of beverage attorneys, which they do really well, and have built
Mm-hmm.
out all the different frameworks that pretty much exist. My guess is, drinks uses the same person as wine access, as last bottle, and I think they've done a great job over, God, what's probably the last 25 years of how to set up the right frameworks, as well as build the right kind of technologies. You have the ship compliance of the world, and you have all these different tech solutions that basically help ensuring that everyone is playing on the right, an even playing field, and following those.
Some of the rules to me are still just mind-boggling, that are like county specific, or even like, certain dry zip codes. It's crazy how tangled this entire industry has gotten when it comes to, regulations around who can, like, just consumer choice. Like the state controlled liquor, like in Pennsylvania, for example, where every retailer is owned by the state, or going even outside of the U.S. and Canada, where like everything is owned by the country. And I know, like, when we're at Pro Wine, the Canadian buyer sort of walks around as if he's this king, but quite literally he is. Like, he's the guy. If you want your product to sell in Canada, you better make sure that he not only likes you, but that he likes your product. It's just wild, wild.
Yeah, it really is. But a lot of those laws were written in the Prohibition time in the 20s. And might be time to dust that off. And
what do you mean they're not still applicable? 100 years later. It's I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about how everything just happens so much faster now, and like generations are usually defined, I think, in like 15 to 20 year windows. And I'm older Gen Z, and then you have younger Gen Z, and I am not even anywhere near what a 14-year-old is like,
Right.
when it comes to quite literally anything, whether it's technological savvy, the words that I use when I talk, I feel like they don't even speak English. It's hard to keep up with them, but the same can be said for just e-commerce over the past couple of years as well. And
Yeah.
I think that's sort of given the alcohol industry a little bit of kick in the right direction.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I'm a millennial, but I still had, like, I didn't have a cell phone, I think, until I went to college. So it's like largely grew up like digital, like still knew how to use a payphone and like landlines. So yeah, it's interesting to think that you have 21, 22, 23 year olds that like have no clue of that, like, of that time frame. Like, they've all grown up purely digital. So it's yeah, it's something that we think about. And I would say that most of the times our consumers aren't really in that. It's in that age group. It's probably a little bit more until they get into their above 25, 26, and our average age is probably closer to about 50, because that's kind of like what the wine buyer is. But it is interesting to think about, like, okay, when we're marketing towards that group, like, what are the values that they have that we really have to hone in on. So it's very different than probably like my parents' generation, who was like, you locked in on a brand, like no matter what, you just kept going to that brand over and over. And I think you saw a lot of brand loyalty within boomers, and my perception, at least, this hasn't been quantified, but it feels like the level of brand loyalty in a consumer product may not necessarily be there for some of the younger generations.
Yeah, I think, I hop over from brand to brand all the time. I got like maybe a couple that I'm keyed in on, but for the most part, it's a little bit all over the place. And I think it's just forcing companies to be more innovative and to not be stuck in their ways, which might be a good thing.
Yeah.
But I got one last question for you here, which ties back into a little bit of our earlier discussions in the podcast. What's your favorite wine memory?
Favorite wine memory. Oh, there's always like there's so many good ones, and then there's probably so many that like I've since forgot as well. Drinking tonight. If I had to pick a favorite wine memory, uh, it might have been the first time that it's actually pretty recent. So I'll pick this one. I shouldn't say pretty recent. A few years ago, drank a bottle of Solos. So it was our head of wine at the time. Um, Knew that I'm a huge champagne fan, and had just got done with the trip over in Champagne, and she had to like wrestle a bottle of Solos, like sample bottle from them to bring to me because she had always wanted me to try this. It was Solos Inicial, um, very different than than a lot of the other champagnes out there. And she's like, "This is for you. Like you drink this when you don't have to drink with me. You just drink it when a special time." And I remember it was had a bunch of friends over for dinner, and like I'd never even heard of it before, and was showing everyone. I was like, our head of wine brought this back. She said I'm gonna love it. She said it's so hard to find. Like like you rarely get to drink this. And like I end up pouring it for everyone, and we're like sitting there drinking, like a little bit, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's good, I guess." But like you're looking at everyone's faces, and everyone's like, it's that thing when someone tells you it's supposed to be good, and then you're not sure if you like it or not. So no one really says anything, and we're just kind of sitting there drinking, and everyone's glasses are kind of going down, and we keep pouring out, and like probably within like 30 minutes, like we end up pouring out. We pour everyone, the bottle's gone, and we like later look and we're like, "What do you think of that?" They're like, "Oh my god, that was like the best wine I've ever had in my life." But it was like right off the bat, we were like actually confused as to whether we like it or not. And I think that was like that showcases like it was such a cool moment to see like how not only how that wine evolved, but that I don't know, you can still be surprised. And ever since then, it's just like we talk about how my budget stays, the same, but it's fewer bottles. It's probably also too because anytime I can get my hands on a bottle of Solos, like I'm grabbing it. And I thought that was like such a interest. It was like within 30 minutes, we're like, oh my god, how do we go buy like 3 or 4 more of those? So I call up my head of wine. She says, "Yeah, good luck. Like Joe, like our allocation we get is like 6 a year." And since then, I always at least take 3 for myself. It's the only time where I take a big portion of our allocation to something. So that was a pretty fun one.
Yeah, I found this wine, and maybe I shouldn't mention it on this podcast because I don't want other people to take all mine. It's called Quill, Quill, not Quilt, which is like the one that you'll see everywhere. But it's they've got one at Diamond Mountain and one of the other ones that I'm forgetting. But super small production, and I found it at a restaurant in San Diego, and like born and raised, like the steakhouse there, and it was amazing. And I think it was some ridiculously low production. And I found it online. I was able to like get like 24 bottles, and I just had my like second to last one. But that's the wine that I've been using without fail to convert the non-wine drinkers or the white wine drinkers, because they're all like 2010, 2011, 2012, and they are in their perfect like sweet spot for drinking, where they still are very fruit forward, but they've settled out a little bit. And in 5 years they'll probably they probably won't be good. But it's like right in that perfect drinking time. Yeah. And so now I'm on the hunt for more. But they don't even reply to me. I've reached out like 1,000 times on their website. You can't order online. Like, what the hell is going on here? I'm gonna fly there. I'll be in Sonoma in like a month. Maybe I'll go track them down and be like, "Listen, I need more of your wine."
You're like at the gates, like knocking. You're like, "Let me in."
Yeah, seriously. I'll build you a Shopify website for free and help you figure out your direct-to-consumer presence if you just give me a case a year.
Yeah, you're like, "I'll do it for super cheap."
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. But before we hop off, can you let everybody know where they can find you and Wine Access online?
Yeah, absolutely. So easy at www.wineaccess.com. So we're super simple.
We love that. Drinks.com makes it pretty simple too.
That's even easier, right?
Yes. I have to repeat it though, because people are like, what's your email? And I'm like, Brandon@drinks.com. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, drinks.com, like the drink. They're like, oh, okay. Yeah, that is easy.
It's like too easy that it just doesn't like it. It's like they can't be the case. Someone else must have that domain.
Exactly. Well, thank you everybody for listening. As always, this is Brandon Amoroso, and you can find me at drinks.com. We will see you next time. Thanks for coming on.
All right, thanks, Brandon.